So we'll open the Thursday, May 14th meeting of the Winchester Select Board. And before we get into some of the work plan stuff, I see Nick is on. Lisa, did we have, and I see Mina's on, did we want to take care of anything in particular to get them out of here if necessary?
So Mina is on for the warrant articles, which is number 5.
Look, okay, we can, and Nick is on.
He was on.
Okay, I saw him on there.
Yeah,
okay.
no, we invite department heads in, so you know, some might be just dropping in just to see what's going on. You know, Nick is new, so he might want to hear what's going on as well.
Yeah, I just didn't want to, you know, bore people or keep them hanging on if we're talking about our work plan and, you know, value statement and stuff like that. So we can jump in and start on the warrant conversation if anybody has questions for Mina or any concerns.
I had a question about the citizens petition. I wasn't clear on why it would still be on the warrant. This is the one about using technology. And because I thought we had voted to defer that, but maybe there's a procedural reason that we still have it on the warrant. So could you just explain what's going on with that, please?
Sure, Susan, that's a good question. It is a procedural reason. The gathering of signatures and the fact that they were certified by the clerk is enough to get it on the warrant. And at that point, it's essentially all of the petitioners' collective ask to put it on the warrant. Your charter's pretty clear that that means it goes on. What the petitioner is really agreeing to do is indefinitely postpone, because that's what's in his control alone, is the motion he makes under the petition once it's put on the warrant.
Okay.
So to avoid a question from somebody else who might have signed it, or whether that's procedurally valid after the signatures are, and to avoid the question later of which petition made it to the warrant. So when you do promise to put it on in the fall, it makes sense to put it in the warrant, but know that he'll indefinitely postpone it.
And does indefinitely postpone mean that it's I mean, I'm not sure everyone in town meeting understands fully what indefinitely postponed, because usually it's done for something that will never come back. Or
that's not necessarily true.
Okay.
in all cases. In a lot of times it does come back. To the extent there's another planning article, to the extent that petitioner agrees to do the same thing, we would say it would be referred back to the planning board, and the rationale for that's a little bit different. That's because there's a rule about zoning articles coming back within 2 years without planning board support.
And then my last question is, so we agreed to defer it, and I think our understanding was that even though we will put it on the warrant for fall and it'll be listed as a select board as the proponent, that we don't necessarily have to take any position on it, either for or against.
That's right. That's right. And when we get to the fall warrant, we can make that clear in the warrant itself too.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And Susan, I did speak with the proponents after we took that vote to make it clear to them that we've agreed to put it on the warrant in the fall, but that is not any indication of our support of it or not. And that our perspective on it may evolve over a period of time as well once we see how town meeting goes. So who knows? Maybe we will. Maybe we won't.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question? This might be for Mark, actually, or Lisa. When I'm looking at Article 16, about the appropriation of transfer of available funds to defray the expenses of the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund. I'm just thinking, and then Article 6 as well, where we're going to talk about the water and sewer rates. Are we going to talk about that? I just feel like we should talk about that sort of simultaneously, because will there be just anticipating questions why we're doing that if we're also raising the rates and the fee? So that it might just be something to think about in terms of our explanation.
Yep. No, that's a good point. I mean, we have to submit a balanced budget and we have to put that in there, in anticipation that, things might change with that warrant article in terms of the rates. Otherwise, we don't have any money for, so let's say people are saying, yeah, we want to postpone that article until the fall. If we didn't have that article to transfer money to the water and sewer fund, they would have no money to operate at some point.
But I'm thinking in the moment when we're in town meeting, we'll, have agreed with the moderator that we're going to talk about these two articles together and vote on them sort of one after the other? Or is that possible to do?
Can I mention something? This is Stacy.
Yeah.
That Article 16, I believe, is the normal fiscal year article to approve the water sewer budget in total. So we kept all the articles that we wanted to focus on first separate from the FY21 budget. So I think Article 15 is the general fund budget. Article 16 is water sewer. Article 17 is recreation, and then so on and so forth. We get into our FY21 business. So we want to do the water rate article prior to the water sewer article to give us time to adjust the numbers if we have to adjust what we said we're going to balance the budget with. So we're currently budgeting $1 million from free cash and another $200 and something thousand from retained earnings. But if those rates increase, we need to go back and adjust the yellow sheet and give us plenty of time to do that. But we can talk about them at the same time and possibly reference it, but I would keep them separate just so that we can give ourselves a little bit of time to make the adjustments. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
Thank you.
So I don't know if we have the ability to maybe explain some of that in the, the background information.
I mean, is that okay if you sort of have background information that refers to another article?
Well, you certainly can do that when you have the motion book. And that's just a matter of tradition town to town. But in Winchester, what I've seen is that your warrant doesn't say a whole lot about the background for each article, but your motion book does.
Yeah.
It has a description of why the action is proposed, and you certainly can make that clear there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it would help if, if on Article 6 and once on the motion book, we have a explanation of the deficit that the water sewer enterprise is running, and then what the motion under Article 16 will be if Article 6 passes or fails, right?
Wow.
So we could put in the motion, hey, if whatever motions, because there'll probably be two motions under Article 6, right? One for the fee and one for the water rate, or it might be one motion, I don't know. But we could say, this is the current deficit for FY21. If, if Article 6 fails, then the deficit will have to be funded either from free cash in Article 16, or if that also fails, then, the town stops providing water service or whatever it is that it would be, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yes, agreed. So I'm pretty set with everything else. Oh, actually, I had a question about the MSBA easement article. Who's going to explain that? I mean, it's more like a town meeting question, but since it's in front of us.
Do you mean the MBTA? Or?
MBTA, sorry. Yeah.
We have an MSBA meeting. Okay.
Yep, I've been saying that for
that'll come
years.
soon enough.
Sorry. MBTA.
Okay. So Article 5.
Lisa, do you want me to answer that for now, or do you want to?
So what's the very latest in the real estate meetings we've been having with them?
So I mean, let me just say that the purpose of the article is it's essentially a cleanup article caused by the MBTA changing or evolving their plans or refining their plans from last year. And we asked town meeting last year to authorize the board to issue to grant easements for the work for the center station. Since then, the MBTA realized that some of the areas that they need easements in were not covered by last year's vote. So it's essentially a repeat of last year with a refined plan. So that's the answer of why we're doing this. In terms of who explains it, I guess one of the things we'll have to work out logistically with the if we're doing this remotely is how you involve someone like an outside entity like the T. Otherwise, I think it'd be a combination of me saying what I just said in some form of the legal reason for it, and Lisa and Beth are closer to the project itself. Lisa, my understanding of where the meetings have been in terms of with the T themselves is they are getting closer to a final plan. There were issues about shore parking on Shore Road. They agreed to move parking to the, they agreed to do some of the elevator work that would take away parking onto the other side of the station. And there's sort of a couple of smaller property rights issues, like, you know, whether or not they need an easement in the rotary, or if they own it enough property rights themselves there. But the biggest one, I think, is the issue of where the elevator and ramp go, and what that does to parking. And I guess my thought, Lisa, is that in the lead up to town meeting, we ought to try to find time to have a more detailed meeting with them again about where they are, because it's been a little while, I think.
I mean, a couple questions I have for consistency. I'm trying to remember who presented this first plan. And I remember the project manager then, Desiree, being available, like they were kind of in the back of the auditorium. I'm not sure they actually came up and spoke. So I wasn't sure if that was a combination of maybe you and Beth.
I think it was me and Beth.
Yeah. So that might be good for consistency. And then I'm just seeing, like, here, pending completion of the MBTA title research. So, I mean, Beth and I are kind of aware of the nuances with the project piece. But I don't know if they're planning on completing the title research before the town meeting. That would make sense for them to do. And who would, this sounds like this is what we're gonna, if this is approved tonight, this is what we're printing tomorrow, this draft.
Right. And that's okay, because remember that what we urged them to do last year, which I wish I had done more fully, was to be broader in what they might need, and then you could give them you can give them what they actually need at the end, but what they should have been asking for is what they might need. And that's what they should be doing again now. So I actually haven't heard directly from Nathan, except through you, Lisa, on where they are on this title work. They think they're set on the rotary, and we're fine with what they've came up with on the rotary. The Shore Road issue went away, so I don't know if there's any other strictly title issues related to this project.
So from a practical nature, the drawing that was most useful in, so like somebody like me who's not a lawyer or an engineer, was when they overlaid this over the last request, so you could see the changes.
Yeah.
So obviously this doesn't do it, but if I just go here, for example, I don't know if you can see my clicker, but so basically over the Aberjona lot, there's the Waterfield lot, there's been an adjustment here in terms of shifting the project over to sort of go around the Chamber of Commerce building rather than over it. So that would be, interesting for folks to see. And I don't know if this, it's kind of hard to see, but if this sort of larger line over it is sort of the demarcation of the temporary easement so that it covers that whole area in terms of their need for construction. And then the Aberjona lot, that was where we, there was some question about like sort of this, some of this parking on this other side. They have an easement here, or their delineation of the easement, which we think covers a lot of the parking spaces. So it might not be shown on here in terms of spaces they're actually going to be taking up, but not necessarily dictated by these easements because they don't need them from us. So those will be important for people to see. But we can work with Beth in terms of presenting those additional materials.
Yeah, I think that's right. That would be helpful to have.
Lisa, do we know any more of a timeline of when they're going to bid and get shovels in the ground?
It's the same. So assuming that they get approval at this town meeting, they would move fairly quickly to work with the select board to get whatever permissions they need in terms of the granting, the grant of locations. They would go out to bid, and they're hoping to have a contractor on board as soon as September.
I've had a couple requests from people about what the plan is and what they're doing on other projects for social distancing. I mean, we don't know by the fall where we'll be, and we're essentially like forcing a lot of people to Wedgemere. And I don't know. I mean, we don't have a backup plan, but I didn't know if there was any way we could respond to some of those concerns.
In terms of more commuting at Wedgemere.
Yeah, I mean, we're funneling a lot of, we're kind of doing the opposite of what we've been trying to do in the community, kind of separating people. We're funneling them all into kind of one location,
Yeah, let me see if I can get updated ridership information. I'd be really curious to see, how many people have been using both Wedgemere and the train, the commuter rail downtown in the last 2 months, and see if we can get some trend data between now and September. I mean, I have a feeling, I hate to say,
I expect that it'll be
gone down pretty significantly. So at the end of the day, we might end up having, traffic at Wedgemere being less than it was before, even if with combined services. So
I would echo Michael's concern, given the proximity of the neighborhood at Wedgemere. And but I understand what you're suggesting, town manager, that the present pandemic and kind of continuing impact potentially on ridership. I don't know if there's a specific date in mind when this project would start, or if it may be after the impact of the public health issues have sort of waned, but hopefully will wane. But in any event, I do share Michael's concern, given the neighborhood and the sort of finite space involved in Wedgemere. On the other hand, we obviously recognize the importance of getting this project done in town center.
Yeah,
can I just, I think this is all very good. And this is the kind of information we would like to have to speak to at town meeting, kind of information to present or have in our pocket, because there will be questions.
Yeah, I assume that the MBTA has several projects going, and they've got some sort of plan of what that looks like. If they're, not every community has 2 stations, but a lot of times they'll close down one side and then kind of force everybody on one side and then move everybody over. So I anticipate that we'll be dealing at some level with this, in in September and in the fall. And you know, I don't know what we can kind of share with people about a plan. So we probably should have something in place that we work with the MBTA about their workers coming in when they're doing work and how we're dealing with it. I imagine that the ridership now is not consistent with what it will be in September. I think it's going to be somewhat back to normal in a lot of ways.
Okay, so I will relay this to the T, whether it's Nathan or somebody else, you know, with the food chain about our concerns, and see if they could be prepared to share information with us or answer questions.
Are there other questions on the warrant or questions for Mina in particular?
Are you ready for a motion?
Yeah, I think as long as everybody feels comfortable with what's out there.
Okay.
And I will say too, I think that we've reached out to the planning board on the zoning article that's there. I don't imagine that that's going to be IP'd for town meeting. So for better or worse, I think it will be there.
All right.
Sorry.
So should I move that we approve the warrant articles for spring 2020 town meeting as presented.
Second.
Should we, I think should that be subject to some of the changes that we discussed that Amy had raised? And
Oh yeah. So as presented with minor necessary edits as discussed.
Second.
okay, I'll take a roll call vote. All in favor, Susan,
Yes.
Jackie,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Mariano,
Yes.
and yes for me. The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Great.
Mike, can I just ask a quick question, just because I know that Jen's trying to get this to the printer today. I heard a couple of suggestions for presentation and backgrounds in the motion book, but I'm not sure I actually heard any changes for this particular document. Did I miss something?
I think that's right.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're not, that this document's ready to go. That's all.
Yeah, I think there was a typo that Susan found.
Oh yeah.
That we haven't fixed. So I was sort of taking that various edits as things like, you know, that aren't materially significant, but
yeah, we'll definitely give it another scrub. That's fine.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure there wasn't something else that I misunderstood. Okay.
Article 4 needs a period. There's another one.
And you know, I think staff usually kind of goes over everything.
I'm sure. I'm
before
not.
it goes out, and
I just saw it, so I thought I'd mention it.
yeah, no, it's good. It's I think there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen on these things, and sometimes a lot of things are moving in and out of them. But we'll see. Are there any other questions for Mina right now on anything? Actually, Mina, while I have you here, have we heard anything on? Well, I guess that we can talk about that later. But anyway, I'm all set unless anybody has any questions for council while we're here.
Yeah, and Mike, I don't know if this is where you're going or if you want to save this for another time, but I'm happy to talk about where the legislation stands on remote town meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I assume we don't have any information yet, right?
Well, we have a little bit. It went from the Senate passed a bill that included the requested language we had. but it also included a bunch of other language on open town meetings and a few other things. It went to the House where our bill was initially filed, and then went straight into House Ways and Means, which means it's they're trying to figure out what to do with the Senate language. We've spoken with legislators for both Winchester and Lexington about it, and we've been told that the holdup seems to have nothing to do with the remote participation for representative town meetings. Everyone expects that will get done. It's the stuff that got added into the bill separately that's the holdup. So the good news is that it looks like the authorization you'll need will come. The bad news is it's not clear exactly when. I got some suggestion yesterday that it might be next week. In the meantime, we've spoken with Lisa and we're preparing, just as we did with the elections when we weren't sure if the legislature would move quickly enough, we're preparing pleadings for the three representative town meeting towns we represent to go to Middlesex Superior Court and ask the court to make clear that remote participation at a representative meeting is allowed, even absent the statute, which is a fallback. We're hoping not to have to use that mechanism, but we're just getting it ready in case we get too close to town meeting and the legislator hasn't acted. So that's plan B, and plan A is to continue to push the legislator to the we know Rep Day is on it. We know he's aware of it and trying to push it, and as are the ones for other towns that have representative town meeting. But we're trying to get House leadership to do that quickly.
Amina, for the fall, for the elections coming up, is the legislature working on vote by mail for both primary and general election?
I understand that they are. That is going to be in, I just the little I know about it, I think there's a lot of issues there. There's a lot of stuff to be worked out of the Secretary of State's office for it. So they are working on it. But if that's something the town is particularly interested in too, you may also want to talk to a delegation about that, because it's there, but they're handling so many things sort of on an emergency basis that I'm not sure how much attention it's gotten in the last couple of weeks at least.
Yeah, I mean, I know that our town clerk had some concerns with protecting poll workers, given that they're indoors all day and in general part of a vulnerable population. So if we could, have as many votes as possible be by mail for both the primary and the general, that would definitely help.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree, and to the extent we can be helpful working with Mary Ellen to push that forward, we will be.
And I think I've seen a lot of other towns kind of do what we're doing with having the election on a Saturday too. So it might be something that works for us as well. Mina, have you heard any concerns about us shortening the hours? I know other communities are doing that as well, for elections, because essentially I think that we would usually go from 7 to 7, but with this upcoming election, it's being shorter. Is there any concerns that you've heard about that?
I haven't heard that. No, I mean, I think there's a recognition that this is going to be a difficult election to run. Town elections this spring are going to be tough to run regardless. And so, no, I haven't. Mary Ellen has been in touch about a few sort of logistical questions and what she can and can't do, and we'll continue to work with her on it, but that has not come up so that I've seen.
Great, thanks. Are there any other questions for Mina about anything at all while we have them here? All right, thank you, Mina. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Mina.
Don't feel like you've got to stay. I know you've got a lot going on.
It's all right. Thank you. I'll make my long commute.
Thank you, Mina. We really appreciate all your expertise
Thank
and
you.
professionalism.
Thank you.
Lisa, seeing as we're kind of on the election topic and town meeting topic, I think that you guys did a some sort of run through or training or on the town meeting. How did that go yesterday?
So I think at the end of the day, we thought the software was was sufficient. That being said, we're still concerned about challenges that town meeting members might have with maybe the learning curve. So it wasn't like a zero learning curve. So even with 8 of us pretending to be doing sort of a mock run through, it did take some, wait a second, what's the login again? What's this, what's that? So there was some concern that the moderator had about whether it could take an hour just to get everybody to figure out how to log in. And then the software actually times out. So and then there was some discussion about split screens and the role of WinCam. So after that conference call, I know there was a conversation that that Mark had with Mary Ellen and with the moderator, just to sort of recap. And I think that there's some modifications that we would like to work out. So we're in touch with the schools to figure out if we can have some sort of combination of having a remote town meeting, but having the ability of people to still come in to the high school, and how exactly we would socially distance that. So it wouldn't be everybody, but it would be folks that maybe would want to come in and let's say, utilize school equipment. Could be their their tablets, or could be like a computer lab, where there's also people there that can help them like right on the spot. If they've timed out, or if they have a particular issue. But essentially it would still be conducted virtually, but some of the people that are participating virtually would be present at the high school for us to provide that kind of assistance.
So we still think that this option makes the most sense?
I think so. I mean, there are some towns that are getting a little antsy on the remote town meeting for a couple of reasons. One is that the town meeting is happening fairly quickly. The legislature, I have no idea when they're going to actually pass the legislation needed. Hence, Mina's preparing to go to court with a couple of other communities. So we're not the only ones in this boat right now in terms of either needing legislation or needing court action to go ahead and proceed. I think there was some concern that other communities had as well. I think that the ideal would be remote participation, but I think everybody understands that there's challenges to that. So again, we don't want to suppress participation if there's town meeting members that have less access to or less ability to work on these kinds of things. 100% of the 130 something town meeting members that responded to Mary Ellen's survey said that they had access to some sort of smart technology. So some of us on the call yesterday use our phones, because some people don't have tablets or laptops, they have phones. So they would be using their phones in order to view presentations and vote. So some of us had an easier time than others, and probably just, I'm sure there's a lot of people that have smartphones that aren't 100% aware of all the different functions of how to use that. So I think that's where the option of having an in-house or having something on like a single campus. So the moderator had mentioned, do we have multiple campuses? I think it makes sense to have something on a single campus. I think we can socially distance at the high school. I mean, there's other communities that are going with the in-person town meeting, and so therefore they'd have to figure out how to socially distance, throughout a high school building, like using different classrooms. So we kind of be like doing the same, which is, socially distancing, but not with all 200, town meeting participants, but with a sub portion who would like to come in. Perhaps they would have to pre-register beforehand, so we would know who's coming in. We can have, a classroom or two per precinct, spread people out that way, have, volunteers or moderators for each room. There's a lot of department heads, for example, that do participate in town meeting. We could potentially ask some of them to, be, in one of the rooms to help, train them beforehand, and then help with any, re-logging in information that people might have to help them get through town meeting.
Yeah, the dining commons is pretty large too, at the high school, and has a couple screens. Would that be an option too for people to kind of spread out into different sections?
Yes, yeah, they're all being looked at. So if we use the dining common, then that could be an area designated if people have their own equipment, or if they're using some of our equipment. I think we would still. So it depends on how many people there are, and so there is an option potentially if people are in the high school building that instead of voting virtually. So if we all have our phones and we all sort of, it'll say like, do you want to pass the budget, for example, or what do you feel about Article, X, and then you can write yes, no, or abstain. So everyone's got the same screen on their phones. If in a lot of town meetings that are happening in person, and they have electronic voting, they have clickers. So we could have a combination of clickers and people doing it remotely. We didn't get far enough in the demonstration, because the demonstration was mostly about the remote participation, about if there's a delay in tabulating, like if it all goes into the same software system. So so when you're voting, everyone's assigned a number. And I think with a clicker, you're also assigned a number. So I'm not sure how exactly that works each time. Like, so we didn't really discuss if the clicker is like, if Amy, if you're voter 1, and Mike, you're voter 2, and one of you was on a phone and one of you is on a clicker, and we don't know who that is until right before town meeting. I don't know if that's, reprogramming clickers, or if you type something into the clicker. So that kind of stuff, I don't know yet, because it was the latter part of the discussion to try to figure out how to accommodate some people coming in to the high school. So it sounds like we can have some hybrid. It's just how crazy do we want to get, 3 weeks out. And there was a discussion about having, breaking out the precincts to have, like 24 people at a time do trainings. So there'd be sort of ample opportunity to pre-train people beforehand, and then again have the option where if folks are very uncomfortable and they can't, or they don't want to figure it out, or can't for some reason, then they can come into the high school.
Are other towns using the same vendor?
So this particular vendor mentioned that, I can't remember if they said they did 25 25 meetings in the last 21 days or 21 meetings in the last 25 days, but they've done numerous town meetings in other states. They have yet to do one here because it was illegal until recently to do it. So, I mean, remote town meetings still don't have the ability to do it, but the open town meetings were given the ability to do remote town meeting at a legislation that was passed, I think I can't remember, or either earlier this month or late last month. So I don't, I hate to say this, but we're kind of all the guinea pigs right now. But at least this
Okay.
company has had experience doing it in other places. So
Yeah, I know that Mary Ellen kind of vetted a lot of them, and I was not so concerned with whether, just curious about what their experience is, because I know really nothing about it. I've never, seen it happen or been voted that way or anything in any capacity. So you mentioned that it kind of times out. It, does that time out like in the middle of a vote or?
yeah, so I've had mine timeout where like I'm looking at the tabulation from the previous vote. And then there's the ability to do all sorts of like presentations on the screen, and then so on my smartphone I'll then jump to I'll jump to the Zoom call, right? Because I want to chat in the Zoom call. And then when I then jump back on the internet browser on my phone to go back and vote, I have to refresh it. And when you refresh it, I have to put in the meeting ID number and my voter ID number, which is a lot of work, especially if you can't remember the nine. I mean, I was doing it so many times, I was remembering the 9-digit meeting ID number and then remembering what my voter ID number was. So I could keep doing it back and forth, but that's, that's a bit of a concern. I don't know who, like, I don't know if Mark did it on this computer, or I know Mary Ellen was doing it on her cell phone. I think Peter might've been on this computer. So I'm assuming it's a lot easier on the computer because you can have like multiple browsers at once. But we did talk about the interaction between Zoom and the software. So yeah, like I said, it's just an additional, an additional complication. So let's say that folks did come into town hall and they had the clicker and then they had the screen up on then they could not worry that they don't have the latest information, right? Because it's in front of them on a screen. And then the clicker is a fairly easy thing. They don't have to refresh the clicker.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you. This is all more technical than I realized, and there is a fair amount of stuff that still needs to be worked out. My suggestion is that when it, kind of gels and we have sort of worked out some of the kinks, maybe one of the things that could be done is you make a video of walking people through signing in, logging in, and how the desktop looks, that type of thing. And the town meeting members can just watch that. I think the schools do that as a training mode, they have a video walking people through things. It's like you do yourself with something that might be new, you go and Google it and find something on YouTube that shows you how to do it. I think that might be useful to do, but I guess there's a certain amount of ground to cover between now and then, and now in town meeting that you're still working on it essentially.
Yep. I mean, and then we've only talked about presentation of materials, logging in and voting. Then there's the, who then, how do you then make a motion to reconsider, for example, right? So there's sort of a place that you can go in the software that gives you all the options of the kinds of motions you can make. Because Peter isn't seeing if you're raising your hand, right? He's not seeing if you're
right. There's a lot.
So then, so then there's so it's then training people on the kinds of motions they can make and when, and then there's sort of like Peter trying to figure out like how and when he recognizes those motions, verbally, somebody else helping so they can press the button to acknowledge it, so that if there's people that want to speak, there's an order that's created, people are allowed in. I mean, it gets slightly more technical when it comes to people that then want to do more than just vote and watch, and then what we do behind the scenes to respond and organize that information.
My guess would also be that the vendor has some materials that we could use to help people learn how to do everything too.
Yes. Yeah.
And Lisa, is the plan to have all kind of organizational updates and presentations be in writing beforehand?
That is the hope and the plan, to have presentation materials available online beforehand and or pre-recorded.
I think that'd be great if we can really encourage people or almost enforce doing that, just given the fact that this is all so new and we want it to work and not take 5 days. You know, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting combination between having WinCam help us, Zoom, and this software system called, I think it's called Open Technologies, or Option Technologies. So for example, if WinCam can help like put up the PowerPoint presentations and then have us record, and then we can then use that to then put on our website, and then, you know, reference the link during the meeting, then that would be a lot easier. And then I think the discussion with the WinCam was that they would not be recording Zoom. They would be recording the presentation, the presentation software itself. So there's some sort of discussion about what would, I think that they offered to kind of help with sort of the liveness of the event, but that would be very complicated. I think the primary role of WinCam during the meeting is going to be just recording it and having the public be able to view the meeting that way, rather than having any of the mechanics of you know, the hand raising and the
Yep.
all that kind of stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah, Lisa, this is Amy. I've done a bunch of these like sort of large scale webinars over the past few months. And I'm just thinking that it's probably really important to have like a producer throughout the whole program, especially if we're using two technologies, to make sure that, for instance, Peter is aware of anything that comes in the chat in Zoom, things like that, and just make sure that people are really clear about how they can communicate with Peter. So if I was just thinking Webex is something that we use a lot, and I feel like it might cover off on most of the things we need. For instance, you can set up polls. So the voting could actually go through a poll within Webex. And then, you know, there's other functionality as well that we could utilize. So I don't know if you've already decided on this other platform, which is totally fine. I just was thinking as you're talking that a lot of, you know, the presentations can be recorded. The whole meeting could be recorded. There's a lot of functionality within Webex that we could use for this. So just wanted to throw that out there. I'm happy to help out and brainstorm if you want.
Yeah, so we did look at a number of platforms. This one was specifically designed for town meeting, so it had the functionalities built in. So I'd be concerned with Webex that you know, you could do polls, but you can't necessarily record them or tabulate them by voter. So like, well, the bottom line is that we've done a lot of research. These guys have done town meetings. We have signed a contract with them. So.
Oh, good. Okay.
But it doesn't mean we can't utilize any other kinds of software or systems in place. But. Yeah, I mean, I certainly would appreciate, you know, especially the expertise of you know, curating, project managing, overseeing it. I mean, we'll have to figure out some of the roles we have behind the scenes in terms of our IT folks, the schools helping. If we're breaking up into various rooms, you know, we're going to have like some of us in, you know, masks and gloves, like, you know, helping people figure out how to log back in, if that's the way that it works.
Lisa, what kind of happens if like we're in the middle of a vote and all of a sudden we see like a bunch of people like drop off, you know, just from kind of the reasons that you described? If you time out or somebody steps away, or are we kind of going to be waiting for people to kind of come back in to get to our, like, the number that we start with of people that are there, or, I mean, the hard thing about town meeting is we usually start off with a bunch of people and then we lose a bunch of people physically. But we may, we may lose people just because of the technology. They may be in and out. And I guess I don't know if we need some sort of policy to discuss about that we can let people know that you've got this time, and we'll maybe give an extended period of time if we see that there are 10 people that accidentally, the internet went down and they're off or whatever, and then, come back in, because, it's always the situation where I think with a lot of these things, everyone says, oh, I wasn't able to vote, or I wasn't able to do this. And I don't know what we do about that,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a matter of Peter sort of announcing that we're going to be preparing for a vote and reminding people of the instructions again while people are kind of scrambling to get back on board. We could also figure out how to minimize the timing. So asking people to use their laptops and tablets, and maybe understanding who's going to be using their phones. And if so, if they're using their phones for voting and presentations, and you're assuming that they're going to get texts and other emails or phone calls that are going to interrupt it, that's usually what times it out. So I mean, if they're using their phone and it's consistently on for the presentation and hopefully plugged in, right? Because that's the other thing too, is making sure that these things don't die, so that you're in the middle, that's the reason why you can't get on board. So I think we can sort of put all that out in terms of, technical assistance beforehand. These are the best practices or the best tips for, for staying, with the entire presentation.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like with the budget, if maybe there's a longer time that we allow for people to vote, because, we don't want to see that at the beginning of the discussion, there are 100 people and then there are 60 during the vote, and then somebody challenges later. I mean, we already get into so much litigation about, process, and, I mean, we're still fighting litigation on the override. I just don't want to create any more.
Yeah, no, I mean, all things that we're trying to figure out in a very limited amount of time. And I'll just put out that this is why some of our fellow towns have pushed off town meeting till September.
I know. A lot of the towns, we had discussed that a little bit in our meeting yesterday. A lot of towns have done that and are going towards this like 1/12 budget model. I don't know if that's an option for us as well.
Yeah, it is. So Stacy, I'm not sure if you're still listening, you can chime in, but Stacy had sort of nudged me on this the other day and said, we really should prepare this plan B. So I know it's on our radar screen. And then I think there's some sort of system in place that you need to kind of register that's not quite online yet. So
yeah, there's hi, Stacy again. There's through Gateway, that's the DOR, Division of Local Service program that a lot of cities and towns use for all sorts of reporting. The tax rate recaps in there and all sorts of other things, but they're going to be developing a program where people can request their 1/12 budget through Gateway, and it's not going to require like all the selectmen to sign off. It's going to be administered by the town clerk. Obviously, they're going to give town accountants access too. But what we can do is submit what they're calling a 1/12 budget, but what it really is a minimum 1/12 budget. So you can budget, you take FY20's budget and you drop in the numbers, and we can adjust those numbers based on any debt service payments we might have that obviously isn't really a 1/12. We don't pay them each month. And our retirement appropriation and a few other things we could manage to get July's in. And once they approve July's, they can give us access to request another 1/12 for August and then the same for September. So there is an option for us to be able to authorize spending before our budget is approved. So there are communities, like Lisa said, that are just pushing off the town meeting to September, doing this 1/12 budget. It's not available yet for me to see what sort of questions and the structure of it yet, but it's definitely something that we could do if this just is a flop with town meeting.
Stacy, what happens to the water and sewer, given that it needs a transfer from the general reserves to even operate?
Well, first of all, we're talking like 2-3 months. So if we have 2-3 months worth of budget, we could assume that the water sewer rates are paying for that share, and then we can deal with the general fund subsidy and any retained earnings that are going to fund the budget. Assuming that would be something that would happen, it'd be like first in, first out. We're going to use their water rates first, and then we'll use the free cash, and then we'll use the retained earnings. So we can take 1/12 of the water sewer budget, plug that in, 1/12 of the recreation department budget. Obviously, we know there's going to be shortfalls in the rec budget, so we wouldn't want to budget any more than the 1/12 because we're already sort of trying to limit what we're going to spend. So there's going to be a lot of, once they have the gateway program available, I'm going to see what they're asking and see how it will work for us and go from there. There's a lot of questions about, well, we know we're going to have shortfalls. Can we do less than 1/12? And there's still a lot of questions, but we can hopefully tackle them once it's available.
I know too, Stacy, that I spoke to a few other communities, Swampscott in particular. They had DLS, they contacted DLS to kind of come in and they said that they were excellent. They provided a lot of resources, a lot of staff to kind of make recommendations of how to proceed on this kind of 1/12 line, but also access to stabilization funds and access to reserves and what that would look like and how it fit within policies. And so I think there are a few more communities doing that. I don't know what it looks like. I mean, it may be that we just have to pull the Band-Aid off with town meeting this way, but I guess I'm still a little concerned if it is messy, and then what that looks like. The other question I had too is if we're going off of FY20's budget, does that allow us, I guess it wouldn't, right? The 2.5% increase on FY20?
Well, yeah, if we would just have to justify the increases. So like I said, it's a 1/12 minimum. So we would take our total budget divided by 12 and then add little pieces to that just to get through July, August, and September. Now keep in mind, July, August, and September, that's a quarter. So even if we don't build in a 2.5% or build in any increases, we still have 9 months left that we're gonna have town meeting hopefully by then, which we would then have a real budget. But that's something that we could propose. We can say we've got these increases that we have to take into consideration, so we add that to our 1/12. So they'll work with us on how we get from the base 1/12 to what we need in July, August, and September.
So are we looking at this as kind of a parallel like option?
Yes.
I would get ready for that even if we do have town meeting, just in case, because the DOR isn't going to want to have on June 30th, 25 communities or 320 communities sending in their 1/12 budget at the same time. So we should just maybe start, once it's available in Gateway, we should start playing around with some numbers just in case. That way it's there and they've approved it. Even if we don't need it, we've already done the work and we've already been able to support not having a town meeting if that happens. Or if anything happens on June 8th and we're unable to get votes and the program doesn't work, like it's just a backup plan.
That makes sense to me to have a backup plan in place.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt for sure.
Thank you.
So are we reaching out to anyone in particular at DLS to kind of walk us through this?
Yeah, I have a rep that I work with on occasion, not on occasion, I work with him regularly. So what we can do, once the program's available, I've been jumping on Gateway to see if it's there yet, and it's not ready yet. DOR is going to be coming out with some guidance. They said it was going to be issued this week, but I haven't seen anything yet, maybe tomorrow. So once it's available, I'm going to jump on and see what kind of information it's looking for, and then I'll bring it back to you guys to talk about it.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
So you ready for the 9:55?
Right, I was just going to
License?
say, Susan, that we don't want to forget that again.
Right.
So, I don't know if there are any questions about it. I think we just need a vote.
Yeah, this is just the part of the parking lot at 955 Main Street. The condo association wants to resurface the entire parking lot, including this little part of it that is leased from the town. We negotiated this sort of 1-year license agreement just to get us past this town meeting, so we have enough time to do the whole bidding process, the whole procurement process for it. And they did agree to increase their annual payment by $500. So it's going to be, 1 year will be at a higher rate than the lease that expired. So they've signed it and it's ready to go.
That's great. You got the rate up, Susan. Nice job.
Yeah, well, no, it was Mark Too Good too.
Nice job, Mark, if you're on.
So I would move that we approve the license agreement between the town and Russell Hill Office Condominium Association for a parcel of land off of 955 Main Street.
Second.
I'll take a roll call vote. All in favor, Susan,
Yes.
Mariano,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Jackie,
Yes.
and yes, for me, the motion carries unanimously 5-0. Great. Thank you, Susan, for working on that. And Mark, I know that sometimes these things that seem like they're smaller can just
Oh, yeah.
snowball. And
But always a learning opportunity.
yeah, and we'll start discussing with them a kind of a longer term plan at some point, next year. Have we heard anything on from the hospital on the pilot agreement? Lisa?
No, I haven't talked with them specifically about that. We typically get something in June, kind of at the very last minute. Is that my understanding, Stacy? Is they usually get it to us like the last minute?
They've been sending our payments later and later every year. They're supposed to give us our payment after 90 days after they close their fiscal year, which I think is in October. But in the past maybe 5 or 6 years, we've been getting a check in June, and even last year we got a check in August. So I hope they give us something between now and June 30th. But who knows what condition they're in and if they're even going to be able to pay us. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so their agreement has some revenue related contingencies.
Yeah, it's based on their financial close, so they can give us 50% less than what the amount we agreed upon if they show that they've closed the year in the red, or they have there's certain percentages and certain amounts that they can give us. I don't have the agreement in front of me, but last year we got 50% because they showed a loss.
Yeah, so we expect that again then.
Yeah, most likely.
I think in kind of communication with the hospital over there, the preparation for COVID and keeping hospital beds open and keeping people out of there has just kind of decimated them financially. So I know it's not the best time to ask them for money, but do we have a ballpark of what our pilot payment was last year?
I think it was about 50,000. We got some of it in August though, so it hit FY21. So we got maybe 30 something in FY19, and then in August we got another 19 or so. So I would expect maybe 50 for this year, if they even come around to paying us.
And I asked just because if there are extra kind of things that pop up, like Lisa, I don't know if we wanted to talk about the WinCam stuff as well, or if that's another discussion.
No, actually, that's a discussion for right now. So,
Okay.
Do we want to finish talking about the hospital, or do you want me to?
Yeah, it was
WinCam?
actually just that my reason was kind of on that. If we expect payment, maybe that would be something that we could use that way to help WinCam out. So yeah, no, that's fine. But I think I'm done with that topic.
Okay. So WinCam, unfortunately, legislation hasn't passed to allow WinCam to receive funding more frequently from the agreements we have with Comcast and Verizon. So, and then starting with the last town meeting, it was just sort of a brand new state legislation that basically said that or state ruling that they had to, that the funding from the two cable companies had to go directly to the town, whereas previously had gone directly to WinCam. And when things come to the town, it means that we have to appropriate them through town meeting, which only happens twice a year. So my understanding is that even in the fall, just with the timing of not getting paid until for every 6 months, is they have to kind of front money. So it's even more exacerbated because we've now delayed town meeting by almost 2 months. And the soonest that they would get any funding would be mid-June. So they need about $50,000 in order to kind of keep everything going in terms of, paying bills, electricity, salaries, and so forth. So I worked with Mina, Mark, and Stacy, and a few other folks to try to figure out what the best way for us to help them would be. So essentially what we can do is, because they are, so it actually doesn't matter that they're a nonprofit. There's a public purpose that they provide for us. So we can actually do a transfer that is kind of an upfront payment or prepayment of what we approved at town meeting. So we could transfer funding from, in this case, it would be the police salary line item, because that's where we have $50,000 available. As you know, the police, because of the delays in academy due to COVID-19, we have 4 officers still in academy, so we're not paying them full freight in terms of our salary. So we can transfer $50,000 from the police salary line item to WinCam, and then we still need to fully appropriate the money at town meeting, but then it would be fully appropriated from the fund, but then 50,000 would go back to the town, and the remainder would go to WinCam.
So
And
Lisa,
there was actually,
I just had a question on, we're transferring this from the police department salary line item, and where is it going? There's a JPEG or something in there? No, there's an acronym in there. But
Hi, it's Stacy. I just wanted to mention, it would be a transfer from the police salary line item to the town manager's salary line item to professional services. And
Okay.
that line item we can pay WinCam out of
okay,
as a vendor. And the PEG account that you're talking about, it's the PEG cable access account, yeah. Hopefully the legislation, like Lisa mentioned, will create a revolving fund for this activity. So when we get the money, we can just pay them. Right now, it's sort of held up with town meeting, the structure of the fund that we created.
okay. Thank you. So do we need a motion, or does anybody have any questions? I guess I don't.
We would need a motion to approve the transfer of the police department salary budget to the town manager's expense budget.
Okay, so I move that we authorize a transfer of $50,000 from the police department salary line to the town manager's expense budget line item to pay WinCam.
Second.
Is this something that we need to do today, or can it be done on Monday, given that this is not on the agenda?
True. Although it's an emergency thing, but yeah, that I don't know.
No, if it's an emergency thing and it can't wait for Monday, then that's fine.
I
I'm okay with
think-
voting today, but
I think it could wait till
yeah.
Monday. We would
Okay.
pay them next week, so it doesn't, today or Monday, if it's not on the agenda, maybe Monday is better.
Okay, so I withdraw the motion.
Yeah, I think that that's fine. I mean, I think that they were just hoping to know what we were doing, so it was more of a uneasiness. But
I mean, I think we can take a consensus. I'm 100% in favor of this. I think WinCam is a great resource, and I just, given the concerns with open meeting that were expressed at the beginning of the meeting, and that it's not on the agenda, and that normally these Thursday meetings are just for emergency items, I think that a transfer of money like that should be at a regular meeting on a Monday evening.
so can we add that to the agenda for Monday?
Yes.
All set.
Was there anybody that had additional concerns about that, or any issues, just so we can let WinCam know that we're it's if everybody's supportive, that it's just the function of waiting until Monday?
One thing I have to mention is Finance Committee has to approve this type of transfer too, so I'm not sure if there's paperwork going to Finance Committee tonight or when that's happening either.
Yeah, so I'm preparing a memo, and I don't know if anybody knows, Stacy, like, does there have to be a particular order of, select board or finance committee approving it first?
Nope, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm fine with voting on it today, and then we can just discuss it again and vote again on Monday to cure any possible open meeting law violation complaint.
Okay.
I mean, to avoid a possible complaint, should we wait till Monday, even though there seems to be a consensus in favor?
So there's no practical reason to vote today, except to sort of bring up or iron out any concerns, because it won't have them be paid any sooner. So Monday is completely fine.
Okay. Thanks, Lisa. Were there any other kind of expense concerns with WinCam, or is this really just a function of us pushing off town meeting because of COVID, and is there anything else that we need to be worried about long term as we're putting the budget together?
Yeah, so I think that WinCam is going to run into this issue periodically, not simply because of town meeting being pushed off, but simply, like, if you were used to getting paid quarterly and then suddenly you're only paid twice a year, that's pretty significant. And then if that twice a year was uncertain. So like I said, I think they were running into normal cash flow issues, even with the twice a year payment. It was, I think, easier when the checks were coming directly to them.
Mm-hmm.
So do we approve like a separate, budget line item for, because if we don't know when they're going to run out, I mean, if the money's coming to us, and where else would they get any support from?
I would also just note that I know we're going to be talking about this Monday, but as town manager has indicated, and as we heard from the presentation recently from the Cable Advisory Committee, that given some kind of realities in the marketplace with respect to cable services, that that we may want to have a further discussion about, sort of making sure, as Chairman just said, like a line item, because obviously we're all very supportive of WinCam. So I'm sure we can discuss these things on Monday, but I certainly agree with what Town Manager was indicating, that the discussion may need to be a little broader and one that, so that we can make sure that they have some feeling of security through what is likely to be, a different economic environment in the coming years compared to the past. Thank you.
So towards that end, and Stacy and I had just started, talking about this without any formal conclusion, but, Stacy had brought up whether there could be, ability for us to front them the $50,000 now, but then, a town meeting to give them the full amount. So they're kind of like $50,000 ahead. So we're always kind of continuously fronting them as $50,000.
So how would that kind of functionally happen as a part of the budget? Would it just be so that their full anticipated budget for 6 months would be funded, and then we would be reimbursed?
Well, when we established this receipts reserve fund, there were two options. There was a receipts reserve fund option and an enterprise fund option. The enterprise fund option is a lot more complicated, but it does allow them to get the money and spend it right when we budgeted at the beginning of the year. But there were several reasons why they didn't choose that. So they knew that they were tied to the fact that we couldn't appropriate the money and give them anything until a town meeting. And they had plenty, they said they had enough money to get through the first 6 months. And then we paid them their money that we got. And now I think there's a combination of problems, like Jackie mentioned, is that the atmosphere, the cable atmosphere, isn't going to likely be able to support their operations because just the nature of the beast. But what we would do is we get the money every quarter, and then the next town meeting, we vote and pay them what we get. What we could do is possibly get special legislation to create a PEG revolving fund. So any money we get, we can just pay them directly right away. Now, I know that there are a lot of local cable companies, not so much lobbying the state, but they're trying to get the state to change the options because the state wanted to keep things transparent, but it's causing problems in every cable company that has this money coming through the town. So hopefully the state's listening and will create a statutory fund structure where we don't have to get special legislation, but we could always do the special legislation route and just pay them what we get. The other idea is to do a line item in every year's budget of, let's say, $50,000 just to keep them afloat. Either we do that every year or we determine what's the best amount for everybody. Obviously, Dave would have to chime in from WinCam about what they would need so that they're not so dependent upon what the cable, the PEG money is. So there's some things that we can sit down and talk about, but for the time being, just giving them this $50,000 to stay afloat for the rest of the fiscal year will certainly help them. But then they'll get, I think it's about $200,000 that's been sitting in that account since we got the last 2 checks. So they'll be reimbursed and they'll be whole again, but then they have to wait till November for our next town meeting, which may or may not be delayed. So giving this $50,000 up front, yeah, we've got to take it out of our own budget, but maybe it's something we build in and think about even more for the FY21 budget, or actually FY22 since FY21 is wrapping up. I don't know if that was helpful.
No, that's very helpful. I mean, I think it's, if this is going to be kind of an ongoing issue, I think we need to figure out a solution. So, so maybe Lisa and Stacy, are you talking to Dave or?
Yeah, we've been talking to Dave, and I'm sure we'll have future conversations with him about just the structure and how things can go in the future. Hopefully the state will say, hey, listen, we understand everyone's struggles. We're going to allow you to set up a revolving fund. And then the issue of getting payment and their cash flow will go away, but there's still the issue of, is this money going to be able to support what we need out at WinCam?
So this will come back on Monday, and then you're looking into what the more long-term solution will be. And we'll talk about that again, I presume.
Correct, yeah.
And what would be involved with the this PEG revolving account?
All we would do is create the fund, and when we get the money from Comcast and Verizon, we deposit it there, and then we would let WinCam know that we got the money, and we would send it on over to them. We have a contract with them, so we can just pay them as we get it. We may have to adjust the contract to note that we'll pay them when we get it.
Do we need any town meeting action at all?
No, the revolving fund is the structure of a revolving fund. It's not subject to further appropriation. So once the state allows you to have one of these funds, you get the money and you have to spend it for its purpose, but you don't have to go to town meeting for approval.
Oh, okay.
That's why they like it.
Yeah. But Dave was concerned for other reasons with doing it that way.
No, it's just not an option. So he wants to do it that way, but the state won't allow us to at the moment.
Oh, okay. And we just need like a home rule petition or something, or?
Yeah, we could do that until the state decides to do it for us, but I don't know. I don't think it's on their top priority list at the moment. So
Yeah, I mean, they've all been pushing for it for a bit. I just sent an email to Dave seeing if he could join us for Monday night. He might have some more clarity.
Okay. Is it something we should, on a parallel track, connect with our delegation on, because they're going to be at our meeting on Monday as well?
Yes, we can do that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's been working with them, but we can see if they have any sense of where it is.
Okay. Were there any anything else under the state of emergency heading?
So I had two things. So we can talk about them as quickly or as elongated as you would like. So one is just an update on the reopening committee work, and the second is to go over the phase 1 reopening plan for town meeting and to get town buildings and to get your input. So the reopening committee, Mike and Amy, you were both on the call. So where we had a first initial meeting, we're still recruiting more people to the committee. We've begun to create subcommittees. There's some homework in terms of what we're doing. I think the overall tenor of the meeting is everyone is looking to chip in. I think there's a lot of discussion about, keeping up morale. I think people understand that this is pretty difficult work. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, and there's a need to kind of dive in and help folks with, the nuances. So there's a discussion about just streamlining communication. There's already talk about the kinds of events that we might need or marketing campaigns that we might need to bring people back when things reopen. There was some assistance in terms of providing expertise about physical changes or improvements that folks might need. I think Mike and I are working on a lot of, sort of government connections and resources. So it's very broad. It was almost a 2-hour meeting. We have another one scheduled for next Tuesday. There's subcommittees that are kind of working as we speak. So it's a lot. We're also waiting for a lot of guidance from the state's reopening committee as well. And I think as of right now, we don't really have a lot of specifics except for kind of the 4 broad phases. But our understanding is that there's going to be more broad guidance, and then there'll be sort of industry, very specific guidelines coming from the state. but everyone's really worried because the 18th is coming up very shortly. Today's the 14th. So, we're prepared in terms of the town with this reopening committee's assistance and expertise to, as quickly as we can, try to interpret what these guidelines mean for, for people.
Lisa, could you tell us like who what are the subcommittees and what areas are you breaking this down into, please?
Sure. There's a subcommittee that's looking at physical space.
Yep.
So, Chris Mulhern, who's an architect in town, is part of the reopening committee, and he is assigned to that. He has, a lot of expertise in terms of, the kinds of things that need to be done.
Mhm.
There's a government subcommittee that Mike is on, that helps connect people to resources at the local, state, and federal level. And thankfully, there's already been really great communication on that front. People know that they can call us. They know that they can contact the state officials. There's regular meetings. Periodically, we've had some contact with federal officials. That's a little bit, I think, harder. Amy is helping with the marketing / communications subcommittee. So thinking about thinking about communications on a very specific, broader level, thinking about the long-term push to support our businesses. There is the youth activities subcommittee, and I'm still trying to recruit more people to that. So youth activities is everything from sports to like the music classes. So it's kind of a very broad category right now. There's, I can't remember the name of the committee that I put Jen and myself on, but there's the business, I think it's like business assistance committee. So it's, basically the Board of Health, myself, and some other folks who can help provide the assistance that businesses need. So it could be resources, it could be webinars, it could be figuring out if there's a way to group bulk purchase PPE, things like that.
Okay, thanks. Because the one I was asking about or thinking about was the youth activities one, because I was thinking it's spring and summer and people are going to want to be out there, for sports, and we need to understand how that needs to be done and try to accommodate that. And it sounds like you got everything pretty well covered. That's good.
Yeah, we were expecting that there could have been some camp guidance this week. My understanding is that I haven't heard anything about that yet, but we're hoping that comes out soon, because we the town had a lot writing on that as well.
Right.
I'm sure a lot of parents do.
Yes.
So we'll obviously we'll keep you updated on the reopening committee. In terms of the other item under state of emergency, whoops, hold on. If folks can see the screen I just shared. So this document is a standard operating procedure, return to work phase 1. We're not sure how many phases we're going to do, but I think it depends on how gradual we reopen. But obviously, the idea is that every phase will open up more services. This first phase is essentially the bulk of it is what we're doing right now, which is working remotely, socially distancing, trying to push online services. The changes that phase 1 would provide would be guidance for more people coming to work. So, trying to provide a little bit more guidance on masks and temperature taking and physical barriers. as well as creating a system for by appointment only. So just to give you the timeline of this particular document, this went to department heads, and their initial feedback is in red. Or my interpretation of their initial feedback is in red. I then presented this document to the employees at an all staff meeting on Monday, and then have asked each individual department to then have sort of department level meetings so that they can provide comments and feedback on this document by the end of the week. So I'm just collecting all of that feedback right now. There's some areas in here in which we need much more specifics. For example, designating doors for entrances and exits, kind of understanding, the taking of the temperature and the logging of the information, the face covering resources we have available, some of the discussion about these common areas and some of the policies. So instead of sort of going through this with you now, I will just say that this document is under multiple phases of reviews. This also took into consideration an employee-wide survey. I think we had 117 employees from all different departments weigh in. So we're trying to be transparent and inclusive when we think about these phases. Some of these things might shift to phase 2 depending on the level of security that people feel in their feedback. So I guess my question for you is in terms of the select board's role, did you, obviously we'll share with you these drafts, would want to continue to get your feedback. That can happen individually, that can happen in terms of a meeting. So your thoughts about how you want to proceed. I can send this to you, you can give me your initial feedback. I can also send this to you on Monday or talk about it more on Monday when I actually have all the department feedback. That might be more relevant.
Yeah, this is Susan. That makes more sense to me once you get the internal feedback. We can look at it. I mean, I don't want to wordsmith your document. That is the furthest thing from my role. My sort of high level question, I have two high level questions. One is, do you anticipate getting a lot more information from the state that could go into this as well? And then the second one is, one of the main things that was identified in that employee survey was daycare. And if people are going to be expected to come back to work and there's no daycare, how is that going to happen?
Yeah.
So just as a very high level thought idea, we have a rec department, and could we consider providing some daycare for folks?
Yep. So the guidance from the state level will continue to be interpreted and referenced here in the document. There's sort of a reference section. So we'll continue to wrap those in here. I think because our phase 1 is going to be very different than the state's phase 1. I mean, their phase 1 is really about sort of a reopening of businesses like writ large. I don't know if they're going to have more specific guidances for towns.
Okay.
During these last 2 months, we've been sort of going back and forth with them about, construction or about inspection services. So, we continue to fight them on those nuances in terms of what we think is the right thing to do. The daycare piece here. So this document still encourages, where possible, remote, sort of working remotely, and then, working with us on any individual, cases or circumstances. It just has a lot more guidance on, the needing to use the masks and the gloves or the common areas that we weren't discussing when we were trying to get everybody remote. And then the daycare piece. So the conversation I had with the new director, Nick, is that we do need a lot more guidance from the state. We were looking at the emergency daycares to figure out if there was any, any nuggets of knowledge we could glean from how they're operating. For example, there's very strict parental drop off. That everybody's sort of segregated. They also severely limit the amount of kids that they can take. I think their maximum is like 2 classrooms of a certain number of people. So a couple things that we would have to consider is just on the capacity limitations that the state has. We would lose money on any
Yeah.
daycare that we would provide. So just another consideration, given that we're already facing a lot of losses in that department.
Lisa, are you anticipating any needs for like funding any of this, policy with like additional computers, with additional PPE, sanitizer? I mean, are we, do we need more money to do what we need to do?
So we are spending more money in terms of needing it. We have some small grants from the Board of Health that's been able to get from the CARES Act and other resources where we've been able to purchase PPE. We've gotten some very generous donations as well. The Chinese American community has been very helpful in terms of donations. The hospital, I believe, just gave us 1,000 masks, which is great. So obviously right now we're gearing those towards things like the mask giveaway the other day, earlier this week, where I think we gave out 3,600 masks to people 70 and over. So we'll continue to do things like that. We're encouraging people to get their own reusable masks. And then, we'll provide masks for any public that's coming in on that appointment only, if they don't bring their own in. So in terms of the facilities maintenance stuff, I just signed a contract for just under $10,000. It was $2,400 for each for 4 public buildings to evaluate the HVAC systems, to look at airflow, in terms of, whether that, any changes that we might need to make sure that that's not an issue when it comes to, the spread of any airborne particles. So that's just about underway. Apparently that's being funded, from within our existing budget line items. There's plexiglass that's been purchased. The facilities department at the DPW has been milling ash into sort of frames for that plexiglass. So Pete is saying that that's all happening within their budget right now, so they don't need any. So that being said, though, I mean, we're tracking all of those expenses because we're hoping to get a lot of that reimbursed. But it seems right now that we've been primarily able to make these investments within our budgets. And I don't want to make a direct correlation, but I would say that thankfully, because our public works, our public health, our public safety, our major departments have been well. We really haven't been reporting any. I don't think there's been any illnesses like in the school department that we're aware of. So funding that we had set aside for a reduction in personnel and the needing of overtime hasn't materialized. Again, knocking on wood, because we're expecting worst case, and thankfully everybody's been safe. We've been able to kind of fund a lot of things with these small grants or within our budgets. Or that additional, I think that $115,000 that we got from FinCom at the beginning of the pandemic, that was very helpful too.
Any questions for Lisa on that? Lisa, I have one question too. I've heard from a lot of people that they had no idea that we had issued an order on requiring masks. Do we have like signage in local businesses and around it all? I mean, I don't know if that's just I mean, it seems odd. I feel like we've sent out a lot of information.
Yeah, I know that the Board of Health was working on signage a while ago, and I thought had actually had gotten signage up in businesses, or they agreed to put them up. We did send a reverse 911. I mean, we put up a mask, we created the mask policy, and then I think like 24, 48 hours later, the state
Right.
imposed their own. So maybe it got lost in the mix. So it's not, I mean, frankly, they're not too much different. So I think if the public is really understanding that they need to wear masks where they can't socially distance, and when they go into businesses, that's sort of the most important thing. And it is something that we began to touch upon, in the reopening committee. I think there was everything from like, what kind of signage do we need, and whether it needs to be different for like, youth versus adults. I think there was a discussion about like enforcement, how do we figure out enforcement of it?
Yeah, I think after the 18th, I think, a lot has kind of been built up to this day as being when the people expect the state is going to just flip the switch and they can do whatever they want. And I mean, and I know that you've been on some of those calls with the lieutenant governor too. I mean, that's just not what is going to happen. But to the degree that people are thinking that, and we'll start. I mean, I've seen, especially today is gonna be a nice day. I think there's gonna be just tons of kids everywhere, and again, it's a tough thing to enforce. I know Judy had sent out a follow-up to remind families about it as well, to all the kind of school age families, but I don't know if there's anything else that we can do.
So are there any thoughts about, and Amy, maybe you can weigh in, I think it'd be neat to do a mask campaign or face covering campaign. So something that puts in a positive light. So I don't know if they're an official campaign or if they're sort of just done by people, but I've seen like Rosie the Riveter signs, like we can do this with like the mask on. And so I've seen people kind of manipulate sort of well-known images and put, like have the masks on, and then like have, like we can do this, and say like, go, like a particular town. So I don't know if it makes sense to create some of those like iconic, cool visual images, have, public officials wear masks and have those, be posted everywhere. But I mean, we do have some folks that have offered their storefronts. So, again, like kids riding around town are not like on our website looking at our order. They're riding around town, and they're like, they can visually see those storefronts. So that kind of might be one of the things that we push forward sooner than later. And we can also do another reverse 911 call either on Sunday or Monday, sort of reiterating what people are expecting, like, or just reminding them that these policies are still in place.
And maybe after Monday, just to kind of, I think there'll be some confusion about the governor's order and what the advisory board is recommending on, Monday.
Yeah, I mean, this is Amy. I think that the important thing for the marketing and communications committee on the larger group is really about how we're breaking through the clutter and providing the most important information to people at the right time. Because as I mentioned in that meeting a couple of days ago, things are changing so fast. So it's, as soon as I'm making this up, but as soon as we put out something about the masks, that'll be lifted, so there's just like, I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but I just feel like the cadence of the communication is really important. The other thing I was thinking about, and this is just a total brainstorm and I won't take up too much time, but Lisa, we can circle back on it. But, I've seen a lot around different masks themselves having, different messaging on it. So like, I was just thinking we could do a 01890 mask and a Winchester mask, and have Heidi DeLeo, for instance, help us with that. And then have that as sort of almost like a cause marketing campaign where we support the COVID-19 fund where people can purchase them. And that would be, you know, if you saw a lot of people walking around with Winchester masks, I feel like that would be almost a message to them to, you know, get on board, and that you can, there needs to be a little bit of a, not fun element, there's nothing fun about this, but just to sort of keep it light, especially for the kids. So that's just something I was thinking about, that we could, you know, through the marketing committee, work with some of the store owners about. So when they start to reopen, that those are available in all of the stores, and that there'd be a portion of the proceeds that go back to, you know, the COVID fund. So those are the types of things I'm thinking about from a long-term perspective, and a way to also, you know, kind of build up the awareness of the masks and how important they are. But I'm also totally on board, you know, putting signage up in the storefronts. You know, there's a piece of this that, you know, there's going to be kids that do their own thing, but also the parents. I think we've talked about this before. How are we getting the information to the parents so that they understand the critical nature of this and can communicate that to their kids? So, you know, there's a couple different layers there. But I think things like, you know, Lisa, I'd love to talk at some point about the parks and what the schedule is for reopening parks, because I think that that's where we're going to see people really eager to get outside as the weather gets better, and how we're communicating that. I've gotten so many questions about that over the last couple of weeks. So anyway, I'm kind of spitballing, but I just wanted to throw out a couple of thoughts that I had about how we can really get the word out to different, you know, areas of town, to ensure that everyone understands, gets through the clutter, and really understands the most important things we're asking of them.
Amy, that's great. I think that's, you know, enforcement is one thing, but sort of making this the new normal through a marketing approach really makes a whole lot of sense.
Lisa, was there anything else under that agenda heading?
There was something that flashed through my mind and then it left. It was more like a notification of something that I can't remember at the moment. So if I remember, I'll let you know. But just to Amy's point, I was just contacting Nick and Jay and a few other folks to see what time they have in the next 2 days to have a meeting regarding parks and playgrounds. So even if we're, for example, not reopening them next week or on Monday, we should have messaging, signage, like, you know, something in place, and with maybe saying we plan to reopen them when this happens. You know, there needs to be something communicated regarding that. So I totally agree on that point. It's going to be 70 and beautiful today. It's going to keep getting better. So folks need to hear from us.
Yep. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, I mean, I know, like, you know, a bunch of people called me. There was like a couple of days ago, maybe it was Sunday, there was just like tons of kids at the Lynch Field on ATVs and bikes and partying, and I don't know what anybody expects me to do. I'm not going to go down there and you know, start you know, arresting kids. I mean, it's just it's unfortunate, but you know, as long as we keep hitting that message home in different ways, you know, because we probably are going to have to carry this through the summer and into the fall as well. So that's what's going to be hard about it. But,
yeah.
But thank you. So at this point, we kind of had intended this meeting to mostly be work plan discussion and kind of a discussion in pursuit of our value statement. I think that we can do that now. So we can maybe just continue that until next Thursday to do exclusively that, unless there are any real, you know, emergency things that we have to get to, and try not to put anything else against it, because I don't want to keep pushing it off because I think it's important, especially with committee assignments and things like that. So
so Mike, can I add, so I think for next Thursday, it would be good for everybody to get a significant update on town meeting, and for us to spend some time brainstorming on the kinds of, to really definitively nail down the ways in which we're going to make town meeting accessible, and communication and trainings, and just to kind of get that much more settled than we've done today.
Yeah, I'd like to say I have a certain level of anxiety about town meeting, so I would like to see
Me
that
too.
more nailed down. So I'm wholly in favor. I mean, Mike, you and I have been working on this piece a little bit
Yep.
to get it ready for today, and I hate to push it off too much, but I think we are all coping with a lot, and town meeting is fast approaching. So, in order to really talk about a value statement, really talk about our own sort of operating procedure, our own policies, and have a good discussion, it might have to wait.
Yeah, and Susan, we can talk, or anybody can, between now and next week on that to see if we can, kind of get that discussion to be, a little bit more cogent. So, I don't think that we have so much luxury as we have had in past years of just kind of sitting around for a few hours on a Friday morning. So, but maybe the more that we can do in the meantime with circulating some questions and things like that, so we can kind of hit the ground running and also deal with some of our town meeting anxiety. So
maybe
yeah.
one of the things you and I could do is to put together another email that is a package of
Yep.
the documents people need to have in front of them, which would be the existing work plan. Like, what does that even have on it? It would be the committees list, and I think it would be the email that you sent out. Or is there something else that everybody needs? I just want to be sure.
the
I mean, there
committee
are
assignments.
several pieces to it.
And yeah, we can kind of circulate that so to get everybody's mind going and have some questions. So, we don't, I mean, my intention really was that we would hopefully move off of having these Thursday meetings because it's,
Yes.
I think it's been too much, and there's a good reason for it, but it becomes a crutch for us extending our Monday meetings. Everybody's meeting on other days with other committees, and there's also a degree of anxiety when you're in these other meetings and attending them, that everything is a little bit of a panic state. So I want to be aware that we're not, I just want to be mindful that it's getting to be a lot. So with that said, so Lisa, on the advisory board discussion as well, is that something that we can kind of have an ongoing discussion about?
Yeah, I think that the idea is to have sort of consistency and transparency and clarity. But I also think that as we need stuff to happen, as there's a new board, we've never had a reopening committee, for example. There's plenty of latitude to accommodate changes or things that we need right away.
Okay, so we'll you kind of pick that up as we go along. The other thing too is Senator Lewis and Representative Day are going to be at our meeting on Monday night, and so I don't know if anybody has any kind of statewide relevant questions for them, but just wanted to remind everybody that they'll be there and giving updates. I think that they're waiting to see what the advisory board is going to issue as recommendations as well. So if there are other residents that are asking you a lot of questions as well, you can identify that meeting as when they may be able to check in with us. They might not want to be coming to all of our meetings, but that might be the most relevant to them. So I think they're scheduled to be there at 8 o'clock. We're going to start with them. So it's a, kind of a unique time for residents, through our meeting to have access to the delegation. So, okay. Any other questions or agenda items for future meetings, concerns?
Quick question, when are we going to start on Monday night? What time?
I don't
And
know.
do
I have
we have
it at
executive-
6:30.
Do we need
Do we
an
have executive
executive?
session that day? Sorry,
Yeah, that's
Susan.
the other question.
I would love to put executive session first. I just feel like it's, well, the one we had, it was like 11 o'clock. I felt like if we can do that, I don't know if that works for people, but
I mean, we can easily have it start, executive session start at 6:30 and have the public session start at 7:30, depending on what needs to be talked in executive session.
Yes, sometimes it's.
Oh, no, wait a minute.
scheduling.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Back up.
Because Beth
We
has.
have the grant of location hearing at 7.
But do we need an executive session?
I don't know.
So I don't have anything that's timely. So if you want to have an executive session at 6:30 and start the regular meeting at 6:45, we can.
I don't want to have one at all, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
We don't need one.
Have anything. We don't even know what to. So yeah, why don't we skip the executive session for Monday then?
Yeah.
And we
So
can start the
I guess that we, in the past we've kind of added one on the end just to have on the agenda to update things for like 5 minutes on here's what's happening with Eversource or whatever. But I agree, Amy. I think that for some of those longer executive sessions that are a little bit more technical or whatever, they probably should be on the front end. So and I know that Beth on the grant location, her schedule, she could only be there during a certain period of time. So I think that's why we were, I think scheduling her at 7 to start. Is that right, Patty?
Yes, it is. She's going to do the 2 grant of locations and then the MS4 with Weston and Sampson.
Right. That was the other piece. Okay. So we'll start at 7 on Monday then.
No, let's do 6:45. Then you can, so that gives you time to open up because the actual hearing starts at 7.
I mean, I don't know that we need to open up with anything in particular. I mean, I don't mind
Okay.
just opening and starting with Beth to give people an extra half hour.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's posted, even if we start the grant of location a few minutes later, I don't think it's a huge thing. What's Beth's timeline of when she needs to leave by?
She didn't give me a timeline of leaving.
Okay.
An hour will give her, I should give her plenty of time to do. The 2 grant of locations are simple. It's just
Right.
MS4 report.
So we should be able to get all of that done pretty quickly. So we'll start at 7.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Agenda in a few minutes when we're done here.
Great. And yeah, I'll talk to you about some of the other agenda stuff as well. But thank you. I'll take a motion to adjourn unless there's anything else.
So Dave from WinCam did confirm he can come on Monday.
Great. Is there anything on the WinCam stuff that doesn't benefit us to be talking about it publicly? I mean, I don't want there to be a perception that WinCam has run out of money because that's not accurate. But I don't know. So
We've already talked about it.
is what I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, cash flow is a reality for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
that's a good question, but
Yeah.
I think we can figure that out.
Yeah, as long as we're kind of managing the conversation, so it doesn't negatively impact them, because I know that it's not really a function of how their board has been managing their resources. It's just there's just been a lot going on. So anyway, that's good news. Thanks, Lisa. Thank you all for another meeting. Appreciate it. I think we got a lot done. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, I'll take a roll call vote. Susan,
Aye.
Jackie,
Yes.
I don't know if Mariano is still there.
He had another meeting. He had a work
Didn't
meeting.
mean it. Okay, that's fine. Amy. Okay, so
Amy's there.
yep, that's fine. Doesn't matter. We've got
Amy's
and
muted.
Yes for me. The motion carries. We'll see everyone Monday at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Yep, thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.